In a school where reputations are everything and first impressions decide your fate, one man walks the halls invisible, janitor's uniform, mop in hand, quiet as a whisper. Students ignore him. Teachers pass him like background noise. To most, he's just a fixture. Another face with a bucket. Another nobody in the system. But what they don't know is that he's been watching, listening. And one day, when a smug teacher decides to make a joke at his expense, mocking the man in overalls, daring him to solve a calculus problem no student could crack, everything changes. Because this janitor doesn't just solve the problem. He destroys it. Effortlessly. And that's just the beginning. What follows is a story that will shake the foundations of Lincoln High. A tale of secrets long buried. Of humility, brilliance, and a twist no one sees coming. Because when the janitor finally reveals who he truly is, jaws drop, cameras roll, and lives are changed forever. This isn't just about math. This is about legacy. About judgment. About how the people we overlook the most often have the most to teach us. So buckle in. Because this janitor? He's not just sweeping floors, he's about to sweep everyone off their feet. This is Janitor Solves Calculus, then reveals he's the principal's father. And trust me, you won't believe what happens next. The school bell rings, and the hallway erupts into organized chaos. Students pour out of classrooms like waves crashing through a dam, laughing, shouting, texting, dodging one another as lockers slam and sneakers squeak against the linoleum. It's just another typical day at Lincoln High. But in the middle of that rushing current, one man moves slowly, calmly. Steady. Intentional. Mr. Harold. The janitor. He's in his 60s, gray-haired with a soft, trimmed mustache, wearing a faded blue jumpsuit and black work boots. He pushes his mop bucket along the corridor, humming faintly under his breath, a song no one else hears. His glasses rest low on his nose, catching the flicker of overhead lights. He's a fixture of the school, always present, always polite, and always invisible. Students pass him without a second glance. Some even veer slightly to avoid the wet floor without acknowledging him. To most, he's just part of the background. Routine. Unnoticed. A pair of teenagers brush past him, laughing about the calculus test they just took. Bro, I swear I blacked out on question 5. One of them says, half laughing, half defeated. At least you didn't confuse limit with infinity, like Chris, the other replies. Man needs a tutor and a miracle. They both crack up and disappear down the hall, their voices trailing behind. Harold pauses for just a second, his eyes drifting through the window of a nearby classroom. On the whiteboard, a half-erased equation remains. Something complex, something elegant, something that seems to call to him. He stares at it with quiet intensity. His brow furrows, not in confusion, but in recognition. Then, just like that, he continues on his way. But fate has its own plans for Harold today. Inside that very classroom, a few students remain behind. It's an advanced calculus class, one of the toughest in the school. The kind of class where students either rise to the challenge or quietly drop out. At the front of the room stands Mr. Kane, a 28-year-old teacher with sharp features and sharper sarcasm. He wears a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves and a red tie, loosened just enough to say, "I'm not like the other teachers." He scrolls through his phone with one hand while erasing the board with the other. Then from the hallway comes that familiar squeak of Harold's mop, long, drawn-out, and unmistakable. Mr. Kane winces theatrically, clearly annoyed. "Every time," he mutters, loud enough for the class to hear. You'd think the janitor could mop without sounding like he's strangling a duck. The class laughs. Not because it's funny, because it's safe to laugh at someone below you. One student near the door giggles and peeks out. "Hey, Mr. Harold," she calls teasingly. "You want to take a stab at this calculus problem?" More laughter. Mr. Kane smirks. He picks up the marker and writes a new problem on the board. This one is absurdly complicated. A twisted mass of symbols, derivatives, and functions, graduate-level material. He steps aside and gestures toward the hallway with mock flair. Let's see if the mop master can solve what our future engineers couldn't. There's more laughter. Some nervous. some mean-spirited. From the hallway, Harold steps into view. Silent. He looks at the board, then at Mr. Kane. And he smiles. It's not smug. It's not bitter. It's a knowing smile. Like a man who's been underestimated one too many times. He walks slowly into the room, the mop still in his hand. The room falls quiet, unsure if this is a joke or something more. Then, without saying a word, Harold sets the mop aside. He walks to the front of the class, picks up the marker from the tray, and faces the board. No hesitation. No panic. He begins writing. His hand moves with fluid precision. Each step of the equation falls into place like puzzle pieces locking together. He doesn't even pause to think. No glances at the class. No theatrics. Just quiet, unstoppable clarity. The room is dead silent now. Phones come out, not to mock him, but to record what they now realize is something unbelievable. The camera pans slowly over stunned student faces. Mr. Kane's arms are crossed, but his jaw has slackened slightly. His eyes flick between the board and the man holding the marker. In less than a minute, Harold finishes. He puts the marker down gently, straightens his back, and turns to the class. A few students gasp. One whispers, "No way." Another says under their breath, That's right. That's actually right." Harold gives a small nod, like he's just finished sweeping a floor, and walks toward the door. And just before stepping out, he looks back at Mr. Kane, not with malice, not with pride, but with gentle honesty. "Everyone's good at something," he says quietly. "Sometimes you just gotta look deeper." And with that, he's gone. The class remains frozen. No one laughs. No one speaks. Mr. Kane swallows hard, his face pale, his arrogance evaporating. Because what they just witnessed wasn't a trick. It wasn't a lucky guess. It was brilliance. Pure, humble brilliance. They said it was just a janitor. Just a man with a mop. But by lunchtime, the story had already gone viral, at least within the walls of Lincoln High. The video was everywhere. On every phone. Passed from table to table like it was some legendary tale. The janitor, solving calculus? No way. Some thought it was a trick. Others swore it was edited. But the math students? The ones who actually understood what they were looking at? They knew. Deep down, they knew exactly what they saw. And so did Mr. Kane. In the teacher's lounge, he sat alone, staring down into his untouched coffee, pretending not to hear the whispers. His smirk from yesterday? Gone. Replaced by something unfamiliar. Confusion. And underneath it all, a bruised ego. Because it wasn't just that Harold had solved the problem, it's how he solved it. With no hesitation. No showmanship. Just quiet, exact brilliance. And Kane, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Later that afternoon, Harold stepped into Kane's classroom to empty the recycling. Same uniform. Same quiet walk. But this time, Kane looked up. "So," he said, trying to sound casual, "where'd you learn math like that?" Harold didn't pause. Didn't blink. Just offered a small, knowing smile. "Same place everyone else learns it," he said. "Life." Kane raised a brow. "No, I mean seriously, are you a retired professor or something?" "Not quite," Harold replied. He turned to leave, but Kane wasn't done. His voice dropped. Less snark. More curiosity. "It wasn't a fluke, was it?" Harold looked back, calm and clear. "You don't forget something like that. It just waits in the back of your mind until someone gives you a reason to use it." Then, just like that, he was gone. No drama. No mic drop. Just a man and the quiet truth. But something had shifted. Across campus, students were talking. The teasing stopped. The snickers faded. In their place, nods. Respect. Even a few whispered, "thank yous" in the hall. For the first time in a long time, they were seeing him. Not just the janitor, but the man behind the mop. And then came the twist no one saw coming. The next morning, faculty were called into an emergency meeting. Teachers filed into the conference room, half awake, half curious. Principal Reyes stood at the front, shoulders squared, voice steady. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to address what happened in Mr. Kane's class yesterday." The room quieted. Kane shifted in his chair. She continued, "There's a video going around of our janitor solving an advanced calculus equation. What most of you don't know is that he's also my father." The room went still. Dead still. Eyes widened. Coffee cups froze midair. She stepped forward, her voice steady, but full of fire. "My father, Harold Reyes, holds dual degrees in mathematics and engineering. He left his academic career years ago to raise me. After my mother died, he gave up everything. His research, his tenure, his future, so I could have mine." She let the words hang there. Heavy. Honest. He came to this school not to clean it, but to stay close. To stay connected to something that mattered. Education. Legacy. Family. Mr. Kane stared at the floor. A knot twisted in his chest. He had challenged that man. Mocked him. Called him out in front of students. But the truth? Harold had done more for education in silence than Kane had ever done in front of a whiteboard. And for the first time, Kane didn't feel clever. He felt small. Across the school, the legend of Harold Reyes grew, but not out of hype. Out of respect. Because now, the janitor wasn't invisible. He was unforgettable. And the greatest lesson he ever taught didn't come from a classroom. It came from who he was when no one was watching. And this was only the beginning. The next day, the halls of Lincoln High buzzed not with gossip, but with reverence. Whispers no longer carried laughter, they carried awe. Students who once walked past Harold without a second glance now watched him with wide eyes and hushed tones, as if a hidden legend had been living among them all along. But Harold paid them no mind. He moved through the halls with the same quiet grace, mop in hand, posture calm, eyes steady. If the attention fazed him, he didn't show it. He wasn't seeking fame. He wasn't chasing glory. He was just doing his job. But for Principal Reyes, things had changed. Deeply. She stood in her office that morning staring out the window, memories flooding back, late nights by the kitchen table, her father walking her through integrals with a chalkboard he dragged in from an old classroom, the way he'd always smiled, not when he solved the problem, but when she understood it. And now, standing at the helm of the very school where he swept floors, she knew it was time. Not for revenge. Not for pity. But for recognition. So she called an emergency student assembly. The gym filled fast, buzzing with curiosity, phones ready, rumors flying. Some thought it was about the video. Others thought maybe someone was in trouble. But no one could have predicted what happened next. Principal Reyes stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, face composed but eyes burning with purpose. Behind her, the big screen lit up, not with a school announcement, but with an old photo. A young Harold in a cap and gown, standing outside MIT with a math medal around his neck. Murmurs rippled across the crowd. "That's him," someone whispered. "Wait, he was a genius?" Reyes spoke, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "You've all seen the video. You've seen what my father can do. But you don't know who he is. Today you will." She clicked again. Another photo, Harold in a lab coat, teaching a university class. Another, him holding baby Reyes in his arms, her mother smiling beside him. My father was a scholar, a teacher, a builder of futures. He walked away from academia to raise me alone. And when I asked him why he took this job, cleaning the school, he said, "Because if I can't teach in the classroom, I'll protect it from the halls." The gym fell silent. Not a sound. Even the air felt heavier. She turned and nodded toward the side curtain, and slowly Harold walked out. No stage lights. No music. Just the soft tap of his boots on the gym floor. He stood beside her, not saying a word, his eyes scanning the crowd of stunned teenagers. Some clapped. Some stood. But all of them, looked at him now with something new. Not pity. Not surprise. But respect. Principal Reyes offered him the mic, but he waved it off. Instead, he looked at the sea of young faces and spoke without amplification, yet somehow, everyone heard. "Your worth," he said, "isn't written in your title, or your paycheck, or the way people label you. It's in how you carry yourself when no one's watching. It's in how you treat others, even when they don't see you. Never forget that." Then he stepped back. The crowd erupted. Applause thundered off the walls. Not out of obligation, but out of admiration. And somewhere in the back, Mr. Kane stood too, his hands clapping slower, his eyes blinking harder. That day, Harold Reyes didn't just rewrite a math problem. He rewrote what it meant to matter. And the entire school would never see him the same way again. It had been days since the assembly, but the ripple effect hadn't stopped. It had only grown. What began as a viral moment had become a movement within Lincoln High. Students who once only cared about popularity and phone screens now whispered about integrity, about legacy, about Mr. Harold. A new kind of energy pulsed through the halls, not loud, but electric. Teachers who had once passed him without eye contact now offered smiles, nods, even conversations. The janitor's closet, the one everyone used to walk by without a second glance, had become sacred ground. Students peeked inside hoping for a glimpse, some even leaving folded notes of thanks. But not everyone was inspired. In the shadows of admiration, envy was brewing. One particular administrator, Vice Principal Dillard, watched the growing reverence for Harold with an expression more sour than curious. Where others saw wisdom, Dillard saw disruption. He had worked for years to climb his way into the office next to Reyes. And now, a janitor was being hailed as a hero. He couldn't stomach it. So when a surprise inspection from the school board was announced, Dillard saw his opening. He waited until Principal Reyes was out for a meeting, then marched into the hallway with two sharp-dressed board members behind him, clipboards in hand, eyes scanning every detail. And there, as if perfectly timed, stood Harold, mop in hand, sleeves rolled up, focused as ever on his work. Dillard smirked. He strode over, voice loud and performative, drawing attention. "Board of Education," he said proudly, "meet Mr. Reyes, our janitor. Recently internet famous." The board members raised their brows, intrigued. "Oh yes," Dillard added, "solves math, sweeps floors. Quite the story. But I've got concerns, safety procedures, labor policies, custodial compliance. After all, who's really verifying this man's qualifications?" His words cut like hidden blades, dressed in professional tone, but driven by bitterness. Harold looked up slowly, his face unreadable. Not surprised. Not shaken. Just still. The board members asked questions. About licenses. About background checks. About protocol. But before Harold could answer, a voice echoed across the hall, calm, sharp, and unmistakable. "If you're questioning his qualifications," Principal Reyes said as she approached, "then you'll need to question mine as well." She stepped between them, chin high, eyes locked on Dillard. "Because I was the one who hired him. Personally. I signed every clearance, reviewed every file. And I don't recall needing your approval to trust my own father." The board members exchanged a glance. Dillard flinched. But Reyes wasn't done. "This man isn't a liability. He's a living lesson. And frankly, if more people on this staff carried themselves with his work ethic and humility, our school wouldn't need inspections to stay in shape." The silence that followed was deafening. The board took notes, impressed, not alarmed. They nodded politely, thanked Harold for his time, and moved on. Dillard tried to follow, but the shift was clear. His moment had slipped. And as he turned, he saw something he hadn't expected. Students gathering nearby, some filming, some just watching, but all witnessing. Not just the showdown, but the dignity, the calm, the strength of a man who didn't need to raise his voice to make a statement. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the school roof and shadows stretched across the hallway, Harold returned to his closet. The mop rested against the wall, the bucket emptied, but something else lingered in the air. Not tension, not chaos, just peace. Because in a place where titles had always determined respect, one man had reminded them that true power isn't worn, it's earned. And Harold? He hadn't said much. He hadn't needed to. But the message was heard loud and clear. Never underestimate the quiet ones, because sometimes they're the ones carrying the entire building on their back. The seasons began to shift, but inside Lincoln High, something deeper had changed. The students walked with a new awareness, not just of their surroundings but of the people they had overlooked for far too long. Teachers were no longer the only ones seen as mentors. And at the center of it all, still sweeping, still silent, still watching, was Harold Reyes. Yet he wasn't just the man with the mop anymore. He had become something else entirely. A symbol. A story whispered between students before tests. A name spoken with weight in staff meetings. And whether he wanted it or not, he had become a legend. But legends always come with their challenges. And one day, challenge came knocking, this time in the form of a new superintendent. Ambitious. Sharper intentions. A man determined to modernize the district and prove that efficiency and image were the cornerstones of success. And to him, Harold didn't fit the mold. At his first school-wide visit, the superintendent strutted down the hall with a media crew behind him, snapping photos, gathering footage, prepping for a glossy campaign about progress. And as fate would have it, there was Harold, on his knees, fixing a leaking pipe under a radiator, his shirt stained, his hands soaked, face calm as ever. The crew stopped. Cameras rolled. The superintendent glanced over, then whispered to his aide, too loudly. "Get that out of the shot. Looks bad. We'll clean this up later." But a voice nearby interrupted. Commanding. "You're looking at the man who is cleaning it up. Right now." It was Reyes. Principal Reyes. She'd been following quietly. Watching. Waiting. The superintendent chuckled, brushing off her tone. "No disrespect," he said. "I'm just trying to present the school in its best light. And right now, it looks like a janitor is playing plumber." Her eyes didn't flinch. "That janitor holds 2 engineering degrees. He could rebuild this building if we asked him to." The aide leaned in, whispering something about optics. But Reyes stood taller. "You want optics?" she said. "Then roll those cameras. Show the world that real education doesn't hide the people who hold it together." The superintendent didn't respond. He didn't need to. The tension said it all. But the camera crew, unsure what to do, kept rolling. And in that quiet frame, without words, without planning, they captured a moment more powerful than any press release. Harold stood up slowly, wiped his hands, and nodded at the principal. Then, with the simplest of gestures, he turned to the superintendent and extended his hand. The man hesitated, then shook it. And in that handshake, the entire school paused. Because what everyone saw wasn't just 2 men with opposing visions. It was the clash between ambition and humility, between image and impact, between someone trying to look like change and someone who was change. From that day forward, the school board backed off. The media buzz faded. And the superintendent, though still polished and proud, never again referred to Harold as just a janitor. In fact, a week later, Reyes received a request to nominate Harold for the district's first ever Community Pillar Award. She didn't hesitate, and neither did the school. Votes poured in. Students wrote essays. Teachers shared stories. Even parents sent letters. And when the award was finally presented, in front of an auditorium packed wall to wall with applause, Harold didn't say much. Just a single line. "You don't need a spotlight to make a difference. You just need to keep showing up." The room rose to its feet. Not for the speech. Not for the title. But for the man who reminded them that greatness doesn't always wear a suit. And sometimes, the strongest leaders are the ones sweeping up after others. The school year rolled on, but by now, Lincoln High wasn't just a school anymore. It was the setting of a story that would be told for generations. Students no longer saw Harold Reyes as just a figure in the corner of their day. They saw him as a compass, a quiet anchor, a legend who never raised his voice, yet somehow raised the entire standard of the school. And Harold? He hadn't changed. He still arrived before the sun, still swept the same halls, still tightened every loose bolt and greeted every student by name. But now, people stopped to greet him back. They left him hot coffee in the morning, sticky notes on his locker with math problems to solve, not to test him, but to connect with him. And he always solved them. Boys. It became a kind of unspoken tradition. And then graduation came. The gym buzzed with families and flashbulbs. Seniors in caps and gowns lined the floor, their futures bright and trembling just ahead. Principal Reyes stood at the podium, delivering her final words as the students of Lincoln High leaned in. But this year, her speech didn't end with school pride or academic stats. It ended with a name. There is one more person we need to honor today. Someone who taught you more than you may realize, not from a classroom, but from how he lives. Every day. Murmurs stirred. Students already knew. She nodded toward the edge of the stage and slowly Harold stepped forward, not in his uniform, but in a simple black suit, polished and crisp. For the first time, the mop was gone. And in its place, a diploma. An honorary teaching award. The crowd rose as one. Applause thundered. Students chanted his name. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He only smiled, held the diploma gently in his hands, and locked eyes with his daughter, who stood tall, proud, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. And in that moment, everything came full circle. The man who swept the floors had lifted the entire school. That night, as the sun dipped and the parking lot emptied, Harold sat alone on the bleachers. No ceremony. No cameras. Just quiet. Until one student, a young boy named Marco, often in trouble, often overlooked, walked up to him with something folded in his hand. A drawing. Of Harold. Wearing a cape. "You're my hero," the boy said. Harold smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, kid," he said gently, "you are. You just don't know it yet." That final act, quiet and small, echoed louder than any standing ovation. Because that's what Harold Reyes did. He made people feel seen. Not by demanding attention, but by giving his. And that's the legacy he left behind. Not in stone. Not in books. But in people. In students who chose kindness. In teachers who chose humility. In a daughter who chose leadership built on love. And in a school that learned, greatness can come from anywhere. Especially from those we least expect. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or made you see someone in your life a little differently, don't forget to subscribe to the Story Tales. Because every mop carries a story. Every hallway holds a secret. And every ordinary person might just be extraordinary. You just have to look close enough. Subscribe now, and keep the stories alive. Clapperboard sparkles.